Hello all, Marty and the Warehouse and Operations as a Career podcast back with you this week. I'm sure it's been a busy week for all of us and we appreciate your visit today. I was out on the road last week attending a few meetings and hitting up a couple of industrial parks. I really enjoy seeing the different warehouse configurations, the history of the buildings, and how you can see the different building designs, many times built to accommodate the shifts in the transportation world and the movement of freight efficiencies. I guess those thoughts could be an episode all on its own one week. I find it really interesting how we've came from straight line buildings to rail dock facilities to the L-shaped designs and even the inbound in on one side with the outbound going right out on the other side. Anyway, almost got sidetracked. The question came up of best practices and where did the phrase come from and what does it really mean? I first started hearing the best practices word in, I guess it was the mid to late 90s. Before we get into what best practices means to me, let's look it up. Some of that self-education stuff I'm always talking about. Okay, on wikipedia.org, I found the first sentence states, "A best practice is a method or technique that has generally been accepted as superior to any alternatives because it produces results that are superior to those achieved by other means or because it has become a standard way of doing things." I also checked out Merriam-Webster.com. That's one of my favorites. A procedure that has been shown by research and experience to produce optimal results and that is established or proposed as a standard suitable for widespread adoption. And I found like 50 sites kind of explaining or selling best warehouse practices online. One of them was www.thebalance.com. It had a pretty good article called 5 Warehouse Best Practices to Lower Picking Time. It's really informative and worth taking a look at. I'll add each of these links to our website for you to check out if if you're interested in them. So let's talk a little bit about what best practices may mean to us as associates. Like I was saying earlier, I first started hearing the phrase best practices from my manager in the mid-90s. We were installing a warehouse management system, really a full-blown system with inbound inventory scanning, directed put away, and selection scanning. Of course, with such systems, every step has to be completed correctly and to keep the inventory levels, slot quantities, and selection, flowing smoothly. These steps, if you will, were the best practices or steps that had been learned as the most efficient in past rollouts. I learned pretty quickly a best practices list needs to be kind of fluid, or as additional efficiencies are found, they should be included. I think our industry started recognizing the importance of best practices as warehousing and transportation costs began to grow, and we went from kind of the Wild West mentality to a more structured and efficient movement of freight model. I believe all the systems have helped us really as employees. Structure and disciplines can really only help us succeed. Our positions are documented and defined, right? We all use best practices every day. We all have our routines that we've honed over the years that work for us. My morning routine is efficient and gets me started each day. Laundry is pretty much on a schedule. And when we're cooking, we follow a recipe, etc., things like that. Here in Texas, we do quite a bit of grilling or smoking meats, and we take our patio time pretty seriously. That means we marinate or dry rub the meat, let it set as we go out and start the charcoal. Of course, any beverages are ready on ice and conveniently placed at arm's reach. We place the meats on the grill and prepare the side dishes and time everything to be done pretty much at the same time. We just kind of walked through or followed the best practices for barbecuing. Seriously though, best practices have been researched and implemented by our individual facilities to be the safest, most efficient, and most cost-effective for each task in the building. I think in many instances we should think of job descriptions or our job hazard analysis sheets and our SOPs or standard operating procedures as another form of best practices, keeping us safe and productive. Us as an order selector could consider a quick best practices guide as something along these lines. I arrive for work early with my clean PPE equipment, put my lunch away and outside clothes, cell phone, etc. in the locker, use the restroom, get dressed for the environment, things like our freezer suit, steel-toe boots, safety vest. I guess here's where we'd punch in on the timekeeping system. Go to the shift start safety meeting and participate in the stretching exercises. Then we would proceed to the equipment area, identify my equipment and sign it out. Perform my pre-trip and turn in the sheet to the maintenance department. Then I guess I'd pick up my selection equipment or, my selection unit. Then I would download the first selection batch. Of course, then proceed to the first slot as directed. Utilize proper lifting techniques and, of course, my ergonomic movements as I've been taught. Then I'd complete the batch and drive directly to the staging area as instructed. Let's see, what would be next? Pick up pallets for my next batch. Download the new batch. Of course, I'm going to have lunch coming up. I need to remember to punch out and back in after the break. Then, of course, I would download another batch and continue selection as before. Complete the last batch just like I did the others. Then, of course, I would turn in my selection unit. I'll need to plug up my equipment, complete my post-trip inspection, and turn the sheet into the maintenance department. Then, of course, I'm going to punch out for the day. Then I'll change and gather my personal effects from the locker. That's kind of simply put, but I think you get the idea. A list of what we found to be the safest and most productive course of action for us as individuals. Our company's best practices are just that, a procedure that's been researched and tested by time to be the safest and most efficient and productive way to perform the operation. Best practices may be one of those overused buzzwords today, at least with us on the floor, as we now have or should have our job descriptions and task SOPs, as well as any safety practices, thoroughly explained to us during our orientation and by our leads or supervisors on the floor. Over the past few episodes, we've discussed some best practices actually. In episode 62, 5 of the dangers with a visit with Joe, we talked about, the front dock safety, and Joe walked us through some of the trailer yard precautions. Oh, and I think it was episode 60, Thoughts on Recruiting and Benefits with Sharon and Michelle. They did a very good job of explaining our responsibilities as a job applicant. Kind of the best practices to interviewing and getting hired, or at least improving our odds of being chosen for the position. That being said, I'm kind of reminded of something I've been wanting to talk about regarding, that job that we're looking for. Over the last couple of months, I've been a little more involved or had the opportunity to be involved in the hiring process with a few different companies. Since we're talking about best practices, let's create a quick best practices for us applicants or job seekers. Remember, as we're checking out the classifieds, job boards, and advertisements for jobs, let's do a little research on the companies and make sure we want to invest our time in training and working for them. Are the advancement opportunities there, and do they offer the exact job or position that we're looking for? We want to make this our career. Are they going to offer that to us? One thing we've learned from past episodes, and it's been talked to by John, Sharon, and a couple of others, is our social media pages and postings. Remember, many potential employers, right or wrong, are going to check out our profiles and try to learn a bit about us from them. Remember that old saying, a picture prints 1,000 words? It's important we understand we're selling our abilities and experience, but our personalities and attitudes are going to be looked at as well. Would you hire us based solely on our Facebook feed? If our mothers wouldn't question anything on there, we're probably in good shape with the employer. I think the next practice would be to have a clean, honest, and detailed job history sheet or resume. Let's list everything that we've done, every piece of equipment that we've operated, and how many hours, days, or years that we've operated it. As Sharon explained to us, in many instances, a recruiter could have a client or position willing to train us. the more we share about ourselves, the more our hiring agent has to work with. We should do everything we can to increase those opportunities. Now, I really think we should prepare for that telephone interview. If we've used those keywords or our experiences or what we're looking to do within our history, we're going to get that call. Now, this brings us up something I hear, about pretty often. If your experience is in the hospital staff arena, don't just send in your resume to a warehouse position without stating that you want to change fields and maybe even list why. The recruiter needs to know that you're interested and why you applied to an unloading position. If we just send in our resume without any notes or reasoning, they may just consider it as you're blasting the resume to every ad out there and never give us a call. By preparing for the call, I'd make notes. What I've done, how good I was at it, why I left, and really think about what questions he or she may ask and have some bullet points for my answers. We need to sell ourselves really strong here. Be up and energetic, very personable. We want to make them want to call us in for that face-to-face interview. Really, if we do a good job here, the face-to-face may just be a formality. This may sound silly or like overkill, but a recruiter was telling me about a prospect that had sent them an email after the phone interview thanking them for calling him, and how, forward he was looking to hearing back from them. That gesture alone solidified his face-to-face interview. He was going to be called in anyway because of his experience, but now he's out front and really on the recruiter's mind. I think the next practice to list could be being ready for our interview. We should bring a copy of our work history or a resume with us and be ready to answer questions about our previous employment. Let's have a few questions ready for our hiring agent too. That could only show them that we've spent a little time researching, this job and our interest in working for them. I ran across an article on Flipboard titled 17 Perfect Responses to Do You Have Any Questions for Me During a Job Interview. Check it out if you have a moment. I'll add the link to our website at warehouseandoperationsasacareer.com. I think it's fine to ask questions, things like what common characteristics do you see in people that perform this job well? What do you think about the culture, the safety culture here? Could you give me a tour of where I'd be working and the people I'd be working with? And maybe what do you think of the company? How did this position come to be open? What does success look like in this position, and is there advancement opportunities? I'm sure we don't want to go overboard here, but a few questions will only show our interest and our motivation. And your hiring agent may be asking us a few pointed questions to learn something about us as well. I found a funny article that explains what they may be using those odd questions for. It was also a Flipboard article, 9 weird interview questions companies use to reveal your true self. It was really satire, or I hope it was, but the point being, they're going to ask questions and we can prepare for them by thinking through the interview, practicing it, if you will, and making sure we present ourselves as positive, informed, and motivated with the positions we have experience with. Oh, and every recruiter and hiring agent we've spoken with here at WAOC reminds us to take the face-to-face interview like it's our first day on the job. I think it'd be a best practice to not bring the spouse and the children with us to the interview. Make sure we dress appropriately. Now, there's no need to overdress, but let's make sure we look the part. I had one interview tell me the first thing he looks at is the footwear. If he's interviewing an order selector or forklift operator, he wants to see a pair of steel toes. If we followed all these best practices that we've just created, then I just can't help but believe we're going to be hired. So our last practice should be to have all of our personal information with us. Michelle explained how important our benefits are in episode 60, and it's our once-a-year chance to get things like our tax withholdings, insurance, and benefit information done correctly. We need to ask questions if we don't understand something, that's being offered or explained to us. I mean, it's our responsibility. Well, I hope I didn't stray too far off the subject and you found value with today's show. Remember to subscribe to us on iTunes, Apple Podcast, and Google Play Music, or any of the podcatchers in the Google Play Store so that you get notified each Thursday when the newest episode is released. We appreciate you checking in with us and hope you have a safe and productive week. Let's all check out the best practices for our facility and mention them to our management team. Nothing will get us noticed quicker than talking about our best practices and safety.